And good evening. It is Dr. D here tonight, and this is what the Christian world would call Holy Week. We're leading up into the death and the resurrection of Jesus the Christ. And tonight my talk is going to be on what is the lesson in the resurrection for us. But before we get into my talk tonight, let's take a deep breath, because I want us to be present, because my talk for some is going to be very controversial. For some of you that are very steeped into a religious belief, I'm probably going to come across as a heretic. But I want you to be open and willing to maybe look at a different perspective tonight than what you have before. I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm just presenting a different perspective to you tonight. So let's take a deep breath. Let's breathe in through our nose. And let's exhale gently through our mouth. As we inhale through our nose this time, let's just envision a ball of love coming down in us, through us, becoming part of our cellular structure, becoming part of our being. And any fear, that's right, any fear leaving us. Let us sit back in peace. And for just a moment, just concentrate on that word, peace. Peace. Peace that passeth any understanding. So the story of Jesus Christ's crucifixion is one of the most widely recognized histories in the world. And according to the New Testament, Jesus, the Christ, because Christ wasn't his last name, Christ meaning the enlightened one, was cruelly martyred and crucified by the Romans around AD 33. And the story goes that after 3 days in the tomb, that was the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, that he miraculously rose again and appeared to the disciples and ascended into heaven. And Jesus' crucifixion, resurrection, and triumph over death is what Christians celebrate every Easter. But today, I want us to perhaps see the resurrection as Jesus saw it. That not seeing it as a suffering, persecution, and betrayal, but rather seeing it as the impermeable love of God, an opportunity to gain a true insight through universal forgiveness, and to look at Jesus' perspective of the world in a different way, in a way that is real. Now, when we begin to look at the New Testament and what we call the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, they give different accounts of the crucifixion, the resurrection, the story. And the thing that we need to remember is that the Bible as we know it was written about 300 years after the death of Christ. And that it's estimated that Mark was the first gospel that was written. It was about 40 years after the death. And John was written about 70 to 90 years after Jesus' death. Now, none of these people, none of these writers were at the crucifixion. The book of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they were written in Greek. And of course, Jesus spoke Aramaic, which was the language of the day. And the book of John was written in Aramaic, but written by somebody who understood the language and practiced also the language of the Greek culture. So some of the differences that differed, you know, one of the stories talks about 3 women at the tomb. One story talks about 2 women at the tomb. There's just all these little differences. So how do we get these differences? I'm so glad you asked. I don't know if you've ever been at the scene of a crime and the inspectors are taking your story, but you could see one thing and another person see the same incident and your stories be completely different. The visualization in what we see, the detail in what we see is so different. And there was nobody sitting there during the crucifixion that wrote and kept a little stenographer writing a story. There was never any TV crew there taking snapshots of what actually was going on. All of these stories had been handed down by generation, by generation, by generation, decades. And you know how a story can change after decades. So with this in mind, let us realize that the Bible is a wonderful book of inspiration. And let us begin to realize, and please know, Jesus was not a Christian. Jesus was a Jew. And the early church, the early Christians were actually Jewish. They didn't become Christians until much later on. You know, as I often say, Buddha wasn't a Buddhist. These were people that were spiritual and understood us being spiritual, understood that God is spirit and that we came from spirit, and coming from spirit, we are pure spirit living in a human existence. You cannot create what you are not. So spirit created the likeness of itself in human form. You know, when you see somebody that's a fashion designer, you can tell their design because you can see them in their creation. A painter, you can see them in their creation. A sculptor, you can see the essence of them in their sculpture and their work. The same thing is with the godness. You can see the creator in the creation that we are. So one of the things about Jesus is he realized that he was the creation of God in the flesh. Now, this resurrection and renewal, they're universal terms, and they're universal patterns in everything. If we take away the non-religious terms, we might say springtime, regeneration, healing, forgiveness, life cycles, darkness and light. And if the incarnation is real and the Spirit has inhabited matter from the beginning as being matter, the world, then the resurrection has multi-dimensionous forms, and I believe to be fully expected to take a look at. For instance, water, fog, ice, steam are all the same thing, but in different stages and different temperatures. In other words, the molecular and the atomic part of them has changed so that they appear to be different, and yet they are all the same: water, fog, steam, and ice. And remember that when we begin to realize that resurrection is simply another word for change, then we begin to see the positiveness in it. So, apart from the liturgy of the Catholic Church, the funeral liturgy says, life is not ended, it is merely changed. And science now gives us more credence on that. So Easter is a reminder that no matter our past, we have permission to leave that past behind and embrace hope and embrace joy in a new life, a fresh start, forgiving the past, even forgiving some of the things we're doing in the present and the future. So rather than look at the crucifixion and the resurrection on it, let's look at it as the spirit of Jesus's message, which was a message of love, a message of acceptance, a message of forgiveness, continuing to live and be alive and active. You know, the Bible says, "O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory?" So very simply, can we look at the resurrection as a reawakening or a rebirth, a change of our mind, an acceptance of what the Holy Spirit's interpretation is wanting to bring to us? And can we begin to realize that it is the recognition of the gifts of God that is in us, and it is the resurrection is simply the relinquishment of all other purposes, other interest, other wishes, and all other concerns, that the single one factor is that we realize that we are the Son of God, that God lives in us, resonates within us, and we begin to walk in resurrection. Now, how do we do this? It's impossible to believe what you see, but it's impossible to see what you don't believe. Let me run that by again. It is impossible not to believe what you see, but it is equally impossible to see what you do not believe. Perceptions build up on the basis of our experience. And the experiences that we have, they lead to different beliefs that we have. And it's not until that these beliefs are fixed in, that these perceptions become stabilized. And in fact, it's simply this, if I can not do it in a rambling way, it's what you believe, you do see. And you know, Jesus made a statement, he says, "Blessed are ye who have not seen and still believe." So, my friends, for those of you who believe in the resurrection will see it. And the resurrection is complete, and the triumph of Christ over the world or the ego. For Christ does rise over the ego, which is edged God out, and all of the works to seek first the kingdom and the righteousness, and all these things are added unto us. But what does that have to do with me? What does that have to do with my life? Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. And when he went to the home of Mary and Martha and Lazarus to raise Lazarus from the dead, he said, I am the resurrection. Yet though he die, yet he's going to live. In other words, you understand that there is more to our life than just what you see now. And basically, you live in me because you live in God, and everyone lives in you, and your life in everyone, you perceive that God in you, or as the Bible verse says, Christ in you is the hope of glory. You believe in the resurrection because it has been accomplished, and has been accomplished in you. Now, how does that happen? When we become victimized, we have to learn how to pull the nails out of our hands from the cross, how to take the crown of thorns off of our heads, how to take the hurt and the spear out of our side, how to not be victimized, but realize that we are pure spirits. You will not find peace, and this is what we all want. You will not find peace until you have removed the nails from the hands of God's Son, which you are, and taken the last thorn from your forehead. The love of God surrounds his Son, which is you, whom the God of creation, who the God condemns the victimization and says, teach not that I died in vain. Teach rather that I did not die, by demonstrating that I live in you. By undoing the crucifixion, the victimization, we begin to see love in our brother. We begin to see love in ourselves. We begin to look around and we begin to see that the resurrection of Jesus lives in us. There is a line from the Course in Miracles, and it simply says this: there is no order of difficulty in miracles, because all of God's sons are of equal value, and their equality is in their oneness. What does this say? You teach what you are. You don't teach what you know. You teach what you are. It's true. However you show up and however you are, that is what you teach. Just as a miracle can heal sickness, regardless of its size, so a miracle can overlook any assault, regardless of its severity. Why? Because there is no order of difficulty in miracles. And this is what Jesus showed us as in the crucifixion. That, yes, when we stop believing that we're being persecuted by the world or by someone, and we begin to choose in love in the face of any circumstance, we have the power. We have the power because the crucifixion was a demonstration, even in the most outrageous assault, that it is powerless to hurt us, and therefore not a judgment for anger. What am I saying? Yes, when I go to church Easter Sunday, I'm going to be all dolled up and fancy. The choir's going to sing. It's going to be religious theater. However, in my daily life, that church is an event. In my daily life, I understand it is Christ living in me. It is the Christ consciousness in me that seeing life as Jesus would see it from the cross. Yes, there are times when there's pain. There are times when my dreams will know crucifixion. There may be times when my body knows crucifixion. There may be times like in Germany, in the concentration camps, when they knew hurt and harm and assault. But in our spirit, we realize that this is only temporary because the real us is the Christ us. And we look and we see the Christ. And as Jesus would be saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. We don't have to hold grudges. We don't have to hold resentment. We don't have to be bitter towards events and things that happen in our life. We can let it go because we see beyond the problem into the solution. Living the Christ consciousness. Living, realizing that the regeneration, the resurrection, the cycles in our life, the renewal act is there. And as our spirit is renewed, the next step that we take on this journey is there for us, and we are seeking first the kingdom, and seeking first right standing, and seeking first right being, and seeking first not to live with malice, seeking first not to live with hatred, seeking first not to live with hurtful thoughts. When I see you in me and you in me, then we cease to have war. You see, Christ overcame the ego mind. The ego mind. The ego mind that would want to was the mind of the day. The people thought that he had come and he was going to shake up things and a whole new earthly kingdom would happen. But what he was teaching people was see beyond the circumstance. We often say that love covers everything. And we often say that love wins, and love wins out, and love rules over hatred. The truth is that it does. But you cannot teach what you are not. And when you become love, when you allow that the fleshly constraints, the ego constraints of it's got to be my way, and the victim constraints of I'm nailed to a cross, or they've treated me this way, or they've treated me badly, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a job, whether it's whatever it is, it doesn't matter. That the mindset is, I am love, and who I am, I'm sharing with you every day. So in this time of resurrection, listen to Spirit as the Christ life in you, Jesus understanding that when the Spirit of God, he embodied the Spirit of God. Jesus came to save us. He came to save us from ourselves. He came to save us from our insanity, our insane way of thinking. He came to help us to change our behavior into that God behavior. You see, I believe in original goodness. Original goodness, that something was created and it was good, and this was created and it was good, and this created it was good, long before Adam screwed up. All this goodness. So us being born in original goodness, somehow we get here in the constructs of this world where there is such a division, and we learn how to hate. We learn how to edge God out. But remember the story I tell a lot about Adam in the garden? That God looking for Adam in the garden, he couldn't find him, so finally he found him, and he said, Adam, what are you doing? You're there with all those leaves wrapped around. And Adam said, I was naked. And God said, who told you you were naked? In other words, I didn't tell you you were naked. But God giving us free will, and having free will, we listen to the voices around us. I'm bad. I'm not worthy. I'm this. I'm never going to make it. I'm always going to be an addict. I'm always going to be no good. I'm always going to be a thief. And we begin to internalize and believe those. Those are nailing us, friends, to a cross. Those are king of thorns and crowns of thorns. We're king of vices. We're king of addictions, because that's what we crown ourselves as. Let's take the crown of addictions off and take the thorns and the nails of out of our hands and begin to rise in the newness of life, because we're told that we are made new creatures. You have the power to change anytime. I'm not saying it's easy. I was talking to somebody recently about their life, and they were giving me a whole laundry list of why their life is like it is. The simple truth was, they're choosing it to be like it is. And they're choosing it to be difficult because they see themselves nailed to the cross. They see themselves with the thorns. If they could see themselves in a new life, in a resurrected life, they would take those grave clothes off, and they would shake them loose, and they would walk out of that tomb of depression into the light of God, into the light that shines on you. I want you to have a blessed Easter. I want you to take this time of year to understand that it's also a time where dreams that are buried into the ground, that they begin to sprout. If you have dreams that you feel have died, begin to look at them, begin to see how they've sprouted. Begin to hold them close to your heart. Begin to lean in to who you are. Dear God, dear energy, dear God of many names, create in us a clean heart and renew a right spirit within us. Renew a resurrection spirit within us. We ask today, and so it is.